over this 5-year period. That is bad enough. I think if you were to go to and start telling your ratepayers you were going to raise their rates by 74%, they would be scandalized, and there'd be some unhappy folks down here. But that data has not been generated by AWU yet. But it potentially could be even worse because of this perfect storm that the city is describing. We're $43 million under, and there's no reason to think that's not going to continue, at least in the near term. And so I went ahead and calculated, if we assume that that we need rates at 1.74% or 1.74 times the amount of last year's rates in order to pay for all this debt, and then we assume, rather than these incredibly optimistic graphs that y'all see that just say that utility sales and revenues are just going to go up and up and up ad infinitum, if we assume instead that the revenue projections are lower at the same rate we're seeing them this year, then you actually get rate hikes above 90%. If it stays that way over the whole period, if your water sales are as much lower over the 5 years, 6 years as they are this year, it's a 94% rate increase. So what you're voting for today is to basically commit to a 74 to 94% rate increase. And the reason is, once you've actually started the construction project, it's simply going to be very, very difficult for you to step back. And all of these other things are external things happening to you. The water conservation is not going away. The economy is really something that is beyond our control as to when that's going to end. Heaven knows we can't control when it rains. And so this is rejecting or postponing Water Treatment Plant 4 is the only optional thing that you can do to stave off this rate increase, or to keep the rate increase, to mitigate it and keep it from being as high as it otherwise would. And I would add that when I looked, and I have some other charts in here that came from information given to the bondholders in y'all's most recent bond prospectus. I wanted to see what you were telling the debtors, or the people who were purchasing your debt. I wanted to find out how much water sales you were telling them we would need to pay off those bonds. And that chart actually is on page 7 if y'all had that over there. But the chart number 1 shows the city's projections to the bondholders on how much water they're going to sell. And you can see, as always, it's just a constant increase. Everything's always going to get better next year. And then below, you see the chart that of actual pumpage, again, is reported to the bondholders. And you see that for the most part, we haven't even reached the beginning of their estimate, and they say it will just keep going up ad infinitum. And so I think that we're overestimating sales, and we're ignoring the effect this perfect storm is going to have on rates. And I don't think anyone has been really saying forthrightly that this is going to mean rate increases that high. I'll just close, unless you have any questions, by mentioning my own background on this, which admittedly is very different from some of the other folks who have been estimating this from the side of the water utility. Again, as Mr. Spellman will recall, Councilmember Spellman, there was a time in the 90s when I was, for a dozen years, a professional opposition researcher, including here in town. And during that period, there was a moment in time when Kirk Watson was elected, when I'd actually my opposition research had been used in all those various campaigns. And a lot of folks think back to that period and think, oh, well, that was SOS and the environmentalism and the salamanders. But if you look at what was actually being used in the campaigns, what was actually going out in the direct mail, what was on the television, from Bridget Shea on down to Manuel Zuniga, who ran against Bill Spellman, who basically lost because he voted to increase rates while he was on the Water Wastewater Commission, is the bottom line. That's the attack that was used. Right down the line, every year the politicians would, or the political consultants would get in the room and say, well, what's the best attack? Is it the salamander? Is it Barton Creek? Well, the ones that made sense to spend money on were, you raise my rates, you raise my taxes. And that's what really gets under people's skin, is that they want this place to be affordable. And it's becoming less and less affordable for a lot of reasons, and for a lot of reasons that have to do with y'all, but none more so than when you're directly increasing their costs in such a large and almost cavalier fashion, where it's not even really discussed before it happens. And so I would encourage y'all before, and we have among our recommendations, and I just really can't stress this enough, is that y'all need to do some more due diligence before you go forward. I'd love to see you have staff estimate the total residential rate impact of everything, not just the one narrow thing, but globally. What do all these things, the cost of service study mean, the WTB4, there's all these things that are happening at once that are all combining to mushroom water rates, and no one is talking about them because the rates are different from the plant, which is different from the transmission line, which is different from whatever else that we're going to segment out, so we don't have to talk about it all at once. But it's really important to figure out how much globally all this is going to cost. Similarly, we think that doing something this expensive that's going to raise rates this much should frankly be postponed until after you've implemented the cost of service study. You're choosing to do two things that are incredibly expensive, and doing them simultaneously puts too big a burden on ratepayers. And you could, I guess, choose not to put that burden on ratepayers, but the city of Houston recently found out that that will come back to bite you, because their bondholders became unhappy at them because all of a sudden they had 9-figure deficits, just like y'all are headed that direction. And they were about to have their bond rating lowered. And just within the last month, had to increase their water wastewater rates in an emergency fashion by 30% in order to keep from having their bond ratings reduced. And I guarantee you, when you get to that point, you're going to have a lot bigger problems than we're even talking about now. It's better to nip this in the bud ahead of time. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but appreciate your time.
Time's expired. All time has expired. Thank you.